all that land and area out west on the west side of town by the tracks and the freeway, that's about 75 acres of land, or up to 120, 150 if you count the adjacent parcels. And all of that land can now, or with the Rio Grande Plan, would be able to be redeveloped at the end, which would generate a lot more money for the city. We actually hired Utah State University to do a study on what the economic impact would be of getting rid of those bridges and developing that land once it's more attractive for developers. And the very first thing they said to us is that we have your results on the monetary impact and also its impact on state GDP. And we,
Okay.
oh my gosh, this is going to be a big deal. We can start selling this thing.
Welcome back to Cities in Motion. I'm Jacob. This is the podcast for anyone who wants cities built for people. Each week, we dig into the systems, design, and culture that shape urban life and explore how smarter transportation, better planning, and thoughtful policy can make our communities more livable. My guest today is Christian Lenhart, a civil engineer and one of the co-authors of the Rio Grande Plan, a bold, citizen-driven proposal to bury Salt Lake City's freight and commuter rail lines underground, restore the historic Rio Grande Depot as the city's central transit hub, and unlock over 75 acres of land in the heart of downtown for housing, green space, and economic development. Christian and his co-author, Cameron Blakely, started developing the plan in 2020, not as government officials or paid consultants, but as residents who looked at their city and decided somebody had to think bigger. Since then, the plan has gone from an online forum post to a serious policy conversation. Salt Lake City has commissioned a feasibility study. A recent economic analysis put the project's potential benefits at over $12 billion. And with the 2034 Winter Olympics now on the horizon, the window to make it happen is suddenly very real. At its core, the Rio Grande Plan is about more than trains. It's about healing a divide, the physical and social barrier that Salt Lake City's rail lines have created between the city's east and west sides for generations. Please welcome Christian Lenhart to Cities in Motion. All right. Christian, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Cities in Motion. Why don't you take a little bit of time to introduce yourself and tell me about the Rio Grande Plan in Salt Lake City?
Hello, I'm Christian Lenhart. I'm a civil engineer. I work in Salt Lake City. I work on transportation projects, mainly freeway ramps, but you may have ridden some of my UTA projects as well. I've been involved with the Rio Grande Plan since the beginning. My friend Cameron Blakely and I were discussing ideas on better use of the Rio Grande Depot as a transit center. We published a paper called, the Rio Grande Plan. That was back in 2020. And since then, we've been working hard to get awareness of what the plan is out into the public. We've adopted, we've got a string of followers who have become volunteers and have put their best efforts towards making the Rio Grande Plan a viable option for Salt Lake City in the future. We have a nonprofit company now that's working to get in contact with state legislators to hold public events and to raise funds so that we can continue to meet with people and make it a reality. So I'm very happy to be here, and let's talk Rio Grande.
Yeah, I recently saw on your Instagram that you hosted the show and tell in the rotunda of your state capitol. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it was a Day on the Hill event. Got breakfast for all the state's legislators. There's about 150 people who were supposed to come for breakfast. And as they got their breakfast, they filed through all the posters and volunteers. We had maybe 30, 40 people show up with buttons asking me about the Rio Grande Plan. And there was in the middle of the rotunda, there was an end scale model of the train station and what it could look like if we were to put the tracks back at the train station and have it be our main transit center. Also, a sister city, Ogden, Utah, just to the north of us. They're working on their Union Station, on making that a active train station once again. And they joined us as well. And then the third city along the Wasatch Front, Provo, also had representation, which is really important because Salt Lake City is bigger than just the city and the Salt Lake Valley. It's part of what's called the Wasatch Front, where there's three major cities, three nodes along the mountains, north to south, Ogden, Salt Lake City, and Provo. And there's between two-ish about 2 million people who live along the Wasatch Front. And if we don't act in unity on building a transit system that connects all of us together, then there's really no point. So it was really good to see representatives from all the cities there trying to make the case for better rail transit.
Great. That sounds uh, I didn't mean to make it sound like a little show and tell. That sounds like a very large show and tell with lots of politicians and important people.
It
Did
was
it
the biggest event we've pulled off so far.
Yeah, that
And
sounds
it
great.
was quite a headache for many volunteers. So if you were a part of that, thank you so much. Your hard work really has paid off.
Today, rail lines create major east-west barriers in downtown Salt Lake City. How do those barriers affect daily life, safety, and mobility right now?
Yeah, sure. Railroads have been in Salt Lake City since just after the Transcontinental Railroads, 1870 abouts. That's about 150 years with trains going either down the middle of the city streets or blocking them off. And those trains do follow the transcontinental routes. They're the big, long cargo trains. Union Pacific's average train length, I believe, is about 9,000 feet now. That's just over, we're getting close to 2 miles long, and that's the average length. So there are trains that are a lot longer. And as they go through the corners in Salt Lake City, they can take dozens of minutes to get through the city. They'll block off crossings for everyone, kids trying to get to school, people trying to get to their jobs, emergency vehicles responding to crime or to fires, that sort of thing. It really separates the city. The freeway goes close to there, and people like to look at the freeway as the big geographic barrier. But there's bridges to get over or under the freeway. When the crossing arms come down, there's no way to get through except for a very few overpasses. And it's a huge detriment to the people on the west side of the city. They've come out in survey after survey to say that we don't feel connected to the rest of the city, and it's the trains that are the problem. And as someone who likes trains, I really hate that they're the problem in the city. I wish that there could be a better way for trains to be useful to the people who live here instead of being a detriment.
Hmm. I can definitely relate, not to that extent, but I went to a very small high school, very small town here in Texas, and often the train would just stop, and there's only one road to get to my high school. Guess I'm late. Okay. Anyway,
Hopefully, your teachers
they'll
extra
probably,
credit for
but
that.
they were probably behind the same train. Who knows? This is a citizen-led project, like you said. It's all volunteers. What are some of like the challenges, and frustrations that come along with something like this really big, ambitious project?
Yeah, the project is pretty ambitious. It's a proposal to grade separate all the railroad crossings in downtown, which is no small thing to do. We would do this by taking the existing well, the historic train corridor along a street called 500 West, and we would put basically a buried trench along that corridor, similar to what you'd see in Reno, Nevada, or the Alameda corridor in Los Angeles. Now, those were multi-million-dollar projects. Those were done early 2000s to move cargo trains out of the area. And we wanted to show that our project or design a project that was similar, something that has already been done. So we talk about Reno and California quite a bit. The project estimate, when we talked with Salt Lake City, they asked a separate engineering firm for a double check of our math. The answer came back that in Salt Lake City, to build a train box, we call it a train box. It's really a trench. Some marketing terms make things seem more appealing
Mhm.
to the public. Trench is kind of an ugly word, apparently. So we've gone with train box. But to build a train box in the locations we're proposing would cost between $3 and $5 billion, which would make it one of the more expensive projects in the state of Utah. Not the most. There's been more expensive projects, but it would be among them. And there's been a lot of pushback on that because it's a big, scary number. But as we've been talking to the public about the benefits of the Rio Grande Plan, about closing the railroad crossings and restoring a train station to its rightful purpose, people have come of their own, they've volunteered themselves. They say, this is something I really want for my city and something that we need to do to make our community whole again. And so our organization has been growing just as people step forward and want to volunteer. Now, talking with elected representatives is difficult because this is not the way projects usually get going. Usually there's a government study that says, let's figure out what the problem is here. And then as part of that, they say, what are the solutions to this problem? But we came forward with a solution without a documented problem. It was a very common sense problem. People understood that the trains are there blocking traffic. There's at least 20 or 30 big long freight trains every day. And as far as commuter trains, there's 25 round trips a day on the commuter trains. So there's 50 trains per day. We're getting close to nearly 100 trains per day at each railroad crossing, which is a really high amount compared to most urban cores. And so it was common sense among the residents that this is a huge problem, but the city didn't have that documented. And I think the reason is that they didn't know what the solution would be. Why ask a question if you don't know the answer? And so we've been stuck in kind of a cycle for the last little while as our organization's been growing of trying to define the problem for the city and then coming forward with our solution. The city eventually did apply for Reconnecting Communities money. This is a grant program by the Federal Department of Transportation. It's called the Reconnecting Communities Grant. Salt Lake City won $2 million back in 2023 to start studying how transportation infrastructure could be improved, and that would at the same time benefit the east-west divide. And so there is a study ongoing at the moment to try and document what is the actual problem. And preliminary results came out just in December. That surprise, surprise, trains are the problem. It's not the freeway bridges, it's the trains that actually close off the roads. And so that study's going to keep going. And so we're going to keep try and do this the formal way of having a study to define the problem, define a solution, and then maybe we can get this in the formal queue of projects. But it's been a long struggle to try and approach politicians with a solution first instead of telling them, here's my problem. How are you going to solve it? It's strange that in a democracy, we don't have like a comment section. It's the suggestion box. We can only, shout about our problems, but, that's the way it is.
I mean, I hate when you said trains are the problem. I'm like, no, trains are the solution. But I guess in your particular situation, yes, that sounds like a big giant problem.
Anything can be a problem if it's in the wrong spot.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, like you said, you are moving front runner, Amtrak, all the freight rail below grade along 500 West. What does that change physically and even socially for the city?
Well, it would change quite a few things. The historic corridor where trains used to run is down the street called 500 West. Look up the Salt Lake City grid system sometime. It's a fascinating story. I won't bother you with it. But the streets are wide because, one, that's where the trains used to go, but also just because Salt Lake City has wide enough streets. It's an old cowboy western town. I mean, trains would literally have the tracks that would just go right down the middle of the street, and trains would stop, and that's where people got on and off. And obviously, that's not acceptable anymore. So the trains were pushed to the far western edge of downtown ahead of the 2002 Olympics, which it was a good time for transit. Salt Lake City opened a light rail system in those Olympics, but at the same time, we lost our train station because we lost our tracks. So by putting the trains back in the 500 West corridor, it would be moving them closer to the center of downtown by about a quarter mile closer in. It would also, for the Rio Grande Plan, be moving them below grade, so there would be no more railroad crossings in the downtown area. So that would solve the east-west divide. It's not just addressing the problem; it is solving it. It's not a problem to ever come up again. You won't ever have a freight train in your path again. But there's also some huge big bridges in the area that go over those tracks. And wherever you have bridges, you have space under the bridges. And that's where you attract a lot of, we'll call it urban blight, I guess, the encampments, the graffiti, piles of trash, that sort of thing, really unmaintained areas. And that's been kind of the defining feature of the west side of downtown for a very long time. People don't go over there unless they have really good reason to, which is one of the reasons why the current train station in Salt Lake City, which is right in the middle of this area, it's why it hasn't brought in any development. If you look at Salt Lake Central Station today, it should be the epicenter of walkability in the state. You've got your front runner commuter trains, you've got your light rail trains and intercity buses, city express buses. They all stop there. There's no sidewalks on the other side of the streets. Like it's completely isolated from the rest of the city. It's not a good example of urban development just because of where it is next to these big bridges and freeway ramps. So one of the changes to the city that will happen when the trains are moved underground is that these bridges can be eliminated. You can get rid of them. They're not going over any tracks anymore, so they can put the roads back at street level. And that means that people who are biking into the city, they don't have to go up and over. There's no bad side of town, wrong side of the tracks because well, the tracks aren't on the surface anymore. All that land and area out west on the west side of town by the tracks and the freeway, that's about 75 acres of land, or up to 120, 150 if you count the adjacent parcels. And all of that land can now, or with the Rio Grande Plan, would be able to be redeveloped at the end, which would generate a lot more money for the city. We actually hired Utah State University to do a study on what the economic impact would be of getting rid of those bridges and developing that land once it's more attractive for developers. And the very first thing they said to us is that we have your results back on the monetary impact and also its impact on state GDP. And we
If you're enjoying the show, leave a rating or a like. It's a small gesture that goes a long way in helping other urbanists find the show. Now back to the show. Okay.
realized, oh my gosh, this is going to be a big deal. We can start selling this thing.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds really great. People are going to want to live there. That's going to be their destination. They want to have coffee. They want to have restaurants and bars and sports venues and all that because that sounds like a great site for development.
Yes, indeed, because that's 75 acres. That's equivalent to 7 or 8 blocks in Salt Lake City. Each of our
Mhm.
blocks is about 10 acres. That's, about the same size as the main commercial district area in downtown as it is. We estimate that if you were to put residential buildings there, you could house between 10 and 20,000 new residents for the city. Like that's huge.
Mhm.
Salt Lake City proper is only 200,000 people. That's the percentage increase of people living in the downtown area when there's already a what we call a housing crisis. Prices of homes have gone so high. It'll be a really big deal for the city and for the state.
If I'm not wrong, the Olympics are coming back to Salt Lake City?
They're coming back.
Okay. How would this fit into the Olympics?
Well, the Olympics could be an accelerant here. Everyone starts thinking about how to present ourselves to the world and the media. What's the best way to put a good face on Salt Lake City? In 2002, they built a light rail system, and it's since grown to be, a pretty good one compared to the size of our city. It's a pretty comprehensive system for a city our size, and there's a lot of credit to the city. But the commuter trains, which weren't running at the time, they used to stop at Salt Lake Central Station, and that's not a place that we were very proud of. And so there's maybe going to be an opportunity to leverage some Olympic funding to help the Rio Grande Plan get going a little faster. We think it's a project that has a lot of merit with or without the Olympics,
Mhm.
but the Olympics can act as a way to get this done a lot faster than it otherwise would.
That sounds really exciting. Gosh, I look forward to seeing it on when I watch the Olympics. And that's not a real the 2034. That's not a real year yet. Okay.
No,
Good.
it's 8 years from now.
No. Okay. The Rio Grande Plan is often described as a once in a generation city building opportunity. What makes this fundamentally different from smaller rail or street improvement projects?
It's kind of the scale of the thing, isn't it? I guess once in a generation is about right. The Olympics last happened in 2002, and it was ahead of those that the tracks were reconfigured through downtown so that they wouldn't be in the streets anymore. They would skirt around the outside edge. So this time would be a plan to put them right back through downtown again, but this time inside of a structure. And the structure is you've got to hold back so many, you know, vertical feet of earth. They'd be substantial structures. I mean, retaining walls, everyone knows, any good general contractor knows how to build them. So it's not like a specific structure like a tunnel. We don't say tunnel. That's very expensive. That's not the right structure for this. But because the structure would be substantial, it's not something you can adjust. So you've got to be thinking well ahead into the future. How many tracks need to go through the city? We want 2 tracks for the commuter trains. We have 2 tracks now for the freight trains. One track is a through track and the other connects. So 2 tracks, we'll say. Then maybe another track for intercity trains is what we're looking at the moment. Something that can act as a statewide connector for like a state-supported service, something to Cedar City and Zion's Park area, or maybe Moab and Arches, something to better connect the state together. So, which is why if you go to the YouTube channel, it's got my name on it, Christian Lenhart. I still need to rename that to Via Rio Grande. Sorry about that. But if you go to there, we spend a lot of time talking not just about the train station, but about the places you'll be able to go from the train station once we build everything out the way we think it needs to be done. So you have to think ahead to the far future because once you put these things in the ground, you don't get to change it very easily.
Yeah. What was this like when it was in its heyday? Like, when was it in its heyday? What was it like? Trains, the surrounding environment. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the Rio Grande Depot was designed by a fellow named Henry Schlax. He was a famous architect from the Chicago area, and his specialty was designing churches. He was hired by the Rio Grande for two reasons. One, because they wanted a building to be extra grand, right? They wanted it to be twice as big as their competitor. There's a different train station in Salt Lake City called the Union Pacific Depot. It's a lot more visible. It's on South Temple Street. It's been turned into a hotel, but compared to the Rio Grande Depot, it's tiny because the Rio Grande, the new Recama Railroad, they wanted theirs to be twice as big. The second reason they hired Henry Schlax was because he was related to one of the board of directors, but we don't need to mention that. Henry, he designed a building that was built out of, really the best materials, the brownstone bricks from New Jersey, marble from Colorado, the same quarry where they got the Lincoln Memorial marble from. They have some iron from a special Noelk Ironworks in Indiana. They put this all together because it was the centerpiece for their railroad. This was where you transferred from the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad onto the Western Pacific. So every passenger was getting off at this train station and spending some time in Salt Lake City on their way west. I think the heyday would have been very late 1910s, probably 1920s. This is when a lot of people were traveling west by train for economic reasons. The train station kind of fell into a decline in the 1930s, and as far as maintenance of the depot, it didn't really recover until the 1980s when it was bought by the state of Utah to be home for the Historical Society. And they have a lot of stories about cleaning out a lot of the empty spaces in the train station that had been essentially abandoned for years because, again, the railroad built this train station twice as big as it needed to be so that they could have bragging rights over the Union Pacific. That only works better for us in Salt Lake City. The train station's just about the right size for us now. We've grown up as a city. It's the right size for us, and I think it's the perfect train station to be our central station in the future.
You brought up LA, and what was the other city that made a train box?
Reno, Nevada.
Reno.
It's called
Yeah.
the yeah, yeah. It goes. It's the same Union Pacific trains that go through Salt Lake City. It's on the main transcontinental route, and yeah, it's a structure about 2 miles long through the middle of Reno, Nevada. Ours, by comparison, would be 1 mile long, but from about 900 south up to the Rio Grande and then North Temple Station.
Are there any other cities that you learn lessons from, like, before implementing all of your ideas to the Rio Grande Plan?
Yeah, the main inspiration was actually Denver Union Station. And
That's great,
we talk
yeah.
about our yeah, yeah. Obviously, it's a very famous station in urban circles.
Yeah, I'm aware of it. I haven't made the trip there. My brother lives in Denver, so, why not? Next time I'm up there, I'll be sure to check it out.
Yeah, a few of our volunteers are transplants from Denver, and they'll have this kind of indignance about them. Like, I moved from a place with a great train station. Now I have to do all this work to get another one. But their perspective has been very helpful. They'll bring back pictures of this is what we did in Denver, and this is why will be a success in Salt Lake City. I mean, we're both cities in the Mountain West. Same with Reno, Nevada. What of our two neighbor cities? What are they doing? We have to do kind of both of them at the same time: bury the trains and rebuild the train station. But it's been proven to work in our neighboring cities. Denver, they had about 24 acres of rail yards behind the Union Station, and they used the money they got from redeveloping those parcels of rail yards and used that to build the train station back to a new transit center. And they were able to pay off the loans. It was about a $500 million project. They were able to pay off their loans ahead of schedule. And so now that project, I understand, is by now at least on track to retire their debt, if not completely debt free. And that's attracted to, if I remember the numbers right, $3.5 billion of commercial investment in the media area around that station, 700% increase from what the government invested versus the private sector. So it's a huge success story in terms of economic development, let alone transit. But when you're approaching the state legislature and saying we'd like to take our train station and move it a little closer to downtown, and they say, why would you want to do that? and then we can promise, billions of dollars in redevelopment. That same USU study I mentioned before about the state GDP, it's about 2.5% increase in the state GDP, or about $12.3 billion of immediate returns to the state of Utah. So when we talk about a project being similar to other cities, it's going to cost more in Salt Lake City just because it is a bigger one-shot project, but it's going to have a much bigger economic output too. So comparing ourselves to other cities can only get you so far.
I can't imagine a project ever affecting the entire state GDP. That's awesome. Yeah, it's obviously important and worth investing in.
Well, I mean, the freeways in Utah, freeways anywhere had that same effect, connecting people together. They had
Yeah.
a marked impact. And this is freeway level funding, like, $3 to $5 billion it's a huge amount. It's been a huge roadblock for us going forward. But when you invest a lot, you will get, I mean, you invest a lot in the right ways,
Mhm.
specifically trains of transit, you're going to get the right result.
Yeah. Real quick, are you native to Salt Lake City or Utah?
Family history is a little complicated. I've
Okay.
come and gone from Utah, but I've lived here about 10 years now.
Okay, cool. I've only driven through Salt Lake City on my way down from Glacier.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah, I made this really exhausting road trip from Texas to Glacier and then back.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Glacier Park's nice. And you went through Utah, so double nice.
Yeah, yeah. I went down through Idaho and then through Utah, then Colorado, and then finally made it back to Amarillo, Texas. All right.
Miles is that?
I don't remember. My car has 150,000 miles on it now. Anyway, too much driving, more trains. What are the biggest institutional or political barriers still standing in the way of implementation?
Yes, like I said earlier, the project's a little unusual in that we
Mm,
pitched a solution rather than identifying the problem and then letting the regular process of finding a solution play out. And so we've had to circle a bit. The We Connect study it stands for West East Connection. So the We Connect study is still ongoing. And Salt Lake City itself, the city government, has been a little shy about endorsing the Rio Grande Plan as its preferred solution because it doesn't want to get ahead of the study. It wants to show that, public feedback, and not just show that public feedback is important. It actually wants to take public feedback into account. If we don't have support for the Rio Grande Plan from the public, well, then what's the point? But that's been one of the efforts that we've been engaged in the Rio Grande Plan is getting the city to perform the study, work at it, and keep it going until we can get the results that we're hopeful for. You've mentioned the Instagram. We've got many volunteers working on the social media channels, trying to get people out to these open houses, trying to get the maps that are put out by the study commented on, so that we can show that the people support the Rio Grande Plan and burying the rails. So that hopefully about this time next year, 2027. When the study's all wrapped up, we can get the Rio Grande Plan officially endorsed by Salt Lake City.
uh,
Now, that's just one level. Once we get to the city, then we move on to the county, and then from the county to the state legislature, and then from the state legislature to our federal delegation, and so on and so on. But we've already started talking with each of these groups, and we think we have enough support so that once the first domino falls, they'll all start hitting each other pretty quick.
okay, very cool. So, what's the current status right now? Like, what step are you in?
So right now in this step, we've got a contingent of legislators who are interested in learning more about the Rio Grande Plan. It's been difficult to find because, again, without the city officially endorsing the plan, while they're still studying it, they feel like we're getting impatient, jumping the gun. Like, what's the point in the state studying something that's the city's responsibility? But at the same time, the state has been working at something called the inland port, which is a truck to train facility or vice versa. And those port facilities means there's going to be an increase in train traffic going through downtown as containers go from the port to get to the rail yards. And if you have any kind of disruption, like let's say someone was on the tracks downtown and you have to stop all rail traffic because someone got hit or there's a near miss and the police need to investigate, well, then you're not moving cargo anymore. And so it becomes a state issue for building a sealed corridor between the inland port and the classification yards. So there's ways we can spin it and make it sound like it's a state issue. I mean, it is a state issue, but put the focus where it is. And that's been kind of on its own one of the main roadblocks to the Rio Grande Plan. Like, it does so many things all at once. when we were first pitching the plan to the state, when we were first pitching the plan to the city council, this was back in 2021, during the COVID days. The city council would meet with just about anyone over lunchtime by Zoom. So it worked out really well for us that we got some extra time with them. But their first reaction to the Rio Grande Plan after we pitched what a great idea this is for transit and for train riders, it's a new train station. What's not to love about that? And they said, well, it's a good idea, and you think it really can close the railroad crossings. And we said, oh, yes, it will close the railroad crossings, but it will also be good for public transit and build ridership. And they said, but it will close the crossings. And then I got a little wiser here. I realized, that's the issue that they care about. So yes, we changed our focus to closing the railroad crossings and making the city safer. But it's been trying to find how the plan most impacts the person we're talking to right at the moment, because it closes the railroad crossings, it opens up development, it rebuilds the city, it eliminates big viaducts, it closes east-west divide and fills in the land again. It makes it better for cargo trains in the inland port, and it raises the state GDP. It's a good investment that touches so many things, but because it does so much, it's really hard to get the vision of exactly what it is to the people who need to understand it.
Very cool. I should have taken a ton of notes. That was awesome. Yeah, I know way more about this now. Thank you so much.
Sheesh. So it only takes 40 minutes to explain it to someone there. See?
You can
That's
use
the
that in your
challenge.
data. Yeah, using your data.
All right. We'll
Um,
do that. If you have 40 minutes, we can talk to you.
40 minutes is too much for a politician.
Yeah, you need to cut that down by at least, 90%.
Okay. All right. So for listeners who care about safer streets, better transit, and reconnected neighborhoods, what is the most meaningful way they can support or engage with the Rio Grande Plan today?
Join our group if you care about the Rio Grande Plan and building safer streets and connections from the west to east. We have our regular monthly meetings you're welcome to be a part of. We have our volunteer efforts to get out to these public events. Maybe the best low-hanging fruit is just tell your family, friends, neighbors, everyone about the Rio Grande Plan and see what their reactions are, because we found that people, when they understand what it is, that you can grade separate trains to the city, not have railroad crossings, and eventually it pays for itself with a better downtown. There's very, very few people opposed to that. And so if you can get the 3 points done correctly, that grade separates the trains, it restores the train station, and with redevelopment, it pays for itself, then there's very little that people can object to. And so with that kind of knowledge out there about what the Rio Grande Plan is, maybe write into your legislators or city council representatives, make your voice known to your elected representatives. I wouldn't have believed before this that a letter or a phone call especially can make that much of a difference, but it really does. At least in Utah, the people listen to you if you're a constituent.
All right. I usually like to ask this question to all of the people that I interview on this podcast. And it wasn't on the list, so I'm sorry. What are some books that you have read recently or papers that you have read recently on this subject that you would recommend to listeners?
Ooh, books on this subject.
Well, I guess
Yeah,
any
well,
subject, any transit or train or redevelopment, city planning, anything of that sort.
Well, I hate to be stereotypical, but
Okay.
I got to be honest. The one I read most recently was Abundance, Ezra Klein,
I
where
just
they
read
talk
that,
about
yeah.
how, well, yeah, how too many good intentions can lead to no project at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. This was really informative, and I wish you the best luck on all the Rio Grande Plan.
Thanks, Jacob. It's good to meet you and talk with you. Wish you luck in your podcast.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Over the coming weeks, we will continue to explore the people and projects that are putting our cities in motion. You can follow Cities in Motion on Instagram for behind the scenes content and updates for the show. I'm Jacob, and thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Don't forget to keep your cities in motion.